Hello again, this is Nick Tramick and Howard Chao, founders of Doon Insights, with the next episode of our podcast, What's Next In? So today we're looking at auto tech again with an interview with the founder of Meili Technologies. So Howard had a chance to sit down with Sam Lee, one of the founders of Meili Technologies, to talk about their company. Howard, what do you think about Meili?
So as you'll see from the interview, Sam is a young but very passionate founder. She has an interesting idea that I don't think has been implemented by anybody else yet. She's focused on a very specific issue in the cabin for vehicles, medical emergencies or medical issues, and the AI are associated with that when using existing sensors. And I think she's made some good progress. So it's an interesting company to take a look at.
All right, well, here's the interview between Howard and Sam Lee.
So today I have with me Sam Lee of Meili, along with one of her investors, Fernando Gomez-Baquero from Cornell. He is with the runway program there, and he will help me co-interview Sam today. So before we get started, let me ask Fernando to give a little bit of background on himself and his program.
Thank you, Howard, and thank you, everybody that is listening. Hi, I'm Fernando Gomez-Baquero. I'm the director of runway and spinouts at Cornell Tech and the Jacobs Institute. So we are here in beautiful New York City, and we have an operation that is fairly new, about 6 years in the making. And in those 6 years, we are hyper-focused on creating companies from scratch. We're really focused on digital technologies, the power of digital technologies to create new startups and to catalyze growth in new industries. And right now we have a portfolio of 94 companies in digital technologies that continues to grow quite well. We have invested about $12 million and through our venture community have raised an additional $240 million for our companies.
Terrific. Okay, so Fernando's going to help me ask a lot of probing softball and hardball questions to you, Sam, today.
Awesome.
So let's get started. Sam, maybe you can give us a little bit of background on yourself and how your company became it.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Sam, CEO and co-founder of Meili Technologies. A little bit about my background. I have a technical background, studied electrical engineering at Princeton for undergrad, worked as a data scientist in industry for 5 years, went back for my master's in computer science at Cornell, which is where I met Fernando. And so we founded Meili really because of my dad. He had pretty bad epilepsy and actually lost the ability to drive, lost his driver's license. I was leaving my last career and thinking about a lot of conversations I used to have with him about what technology could do to help him, and realized that the industry really hadn't accommodated people like him yet. So decided to build it myself. So that said, what we're building is health emergency detection software for vehicles. And so with the software, we use existing sensors in the car and existing systems like automatic emergency braking to proactively bring the vehicle to a stop to avoid a crash when somebody experiences a medical event behind the wheel. We also package that data, send it on to first responders.
So you use existing hardware. You don't have any of your own hardware. You're a software company?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And so what's the essence of your software? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's really based in deep learning. So we understand patterns of what normal driving behavior looks like, as well as incapacitated driving behavior. We're focused less on diagnosing. We're not really doctors, and we don't think it's really our place to diagnose, but really our place to highlight when somebody needs to receive help from 911. So when do we call 911? So we understand when somebody really cannot be behind the wheel and not recognize that, but that could be events like a heart attack, a seizure, diabetic emergency, altered mental status in general. We are working with a hospital ecosystem in New York. One of our advisors runs their epilepsy and sleep labs, actually, in order to collect a lot of that relevant data. It needs to be collected in a very specific way for it to be relevant in the vehicle, and that just doesn't exist at scale yet. So a lot of our algorithms all rely on that data as well.
Sam, can you talk a little bit about what are the trends that you're seeing in the automotive space that allow you to actually do this right now, and how that is changing and will change in the future?
Yeah, I think if we were trying to do this 5 years ago, it'd be a hell of a lot harder. Right now, the automotive space is changing rapidly. You're seeing a lot more software opportunities becoming available. For instance, you're seeing like $15 a month for mapping available in the vehicle, competing with like Google Maps on the iPhone, or even charging for seat warmers and things like that. And I think we add a lot of value for road safety that goes beyond those offerings as well. You're seeing the software becoming more of a focus for the vehicle, with software-defined vehicles as well as vehicle OSs being developed. In addition, with more and more autonomous features being enabled, you're seeing legislation actually enable like supporting software too, and also actually requiring a lot of the sensors that we would need. For instance, over in the EU, one thing that has helped for us, for timing at least, is the Forgotten Child anti-abandonment laws, which are requiring the ability to monitor the inside of the cabin to see if a child's been left in the vehicle. Cameras, very helpful, but not totally efficient for recognizing if a child's been left like under a blanket. So you're seeing more and more vehicle manufacturers as well as tier 1 suppliers invest time and money into incorporating things like millimeter wave radar to contactlessly detect vital signs. Testing, as you see more and more autonomous vehicles and autonomous shuttles, right now there's a liability requiring bus drivers actually to be able to call 911 if one of their passengers experiences a medical event. As we have these shuttle systems of the future and there's no bus driver, that liability will likely fall on the fleet owners. And so how will they accommodate that? How will they make sure that they're actually calling 911 when necessary? That's where we kind of step in.
So Sam, what is the minimum hardware required for your system in a vehicle in the cabin?
Yeah, so we're sensor agnostic, which is great because it means we can be quite flexible. Right now, we really do rely on 2 types of sensors though. So a visual sensor, so that's a camera, whether it's an IR camera, a thermal camera, or an RGB camera. And with that, we don't ever actually save the full image of the person. We never offload the full image of the person from the vehicle. We just extract facial points and body pose points. And that's what we use to try and be privacy preserving. You're seeing more and more driver facing cameras appear, especially in the higher end models right now with those ADAS features. In addition, a vital sensor. What that vital sensor is still kind of getting figured out by the industry. We're betting on millimeter wave, but our systems don't necessarily need to require millimeter wave radar. We could also use like ECG in a seatbelt, even an IR-based vitals measurement, but just some kind of vitals measurement, as long as it's reliable, we're happy to use it.
Okay, great. So how has the reception been in the industry for your offering? How far have you gotten?
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. So we're currently doing a POC with one of the top 3 auto conglomerates in the world, which will culminate in a demonstration at CES. So they've been very excited to show the future of in-cabin health assessment and safety. We're also in talks with about 6 other major companies right now for POCs and pilots in Q1, Q2 of next year. That includes traditional and autonomous vehicle OEMs, as well as fleet telematics companies. That's a big vertical that we're getting into because we can help actually avoid some of the like crashes caused by larger trucks. Actually, truck drivers tend to have about twice as likely to have diabetes. And so they're more at risk of experiencing like a diabetic event while behind the wheel. And when crashes occur with a truck, they tend to be more severe. And that leads to higher insurance costs, things like that. But we've seen a ton of interest from both of these spaces. We probably have a pipeline of like 20 or so companies that are excited to work with us once it's fully built. We have an early version, but once we get past MVP and are actually commercializable. But everyone has either said like, yes, we want to work on this now, or it is on our roadmap and it will be coming up soon. You'll be the first we call.
Great. So what's your go-to-market strategy? Are you targeting mostly OEMs, or are there other strategies out there? And as we all know, the sales cycle in the automotive industry is challenging. So how do you think about all that?
That's a great question. Yeah, no, we started with OEMs, and we're still definitely working with OEMs, investing in those relationships for the longer sales cycle. But in order to actually have a faster return as well, we're also focusing on that fleet vertical. Whereas OEMs, you see more like a 3 to 5 year time horizon, and maybe on the lower side with software, depending on where the industry goes. With fleets, actually, we've been told by a number of our friends in that space that it's more like a 3 month to 1 year of go-to-market once you have a fully developed product. So it's much faster go-to-market. There's a lot of interest in getting more intelligence on what's happening in the cabin and enabling safety. Insurance costs for fleets are through the roof, and about 12% of fleet crashes are caused by, the DOT called it driver non-performance, but a lot of it's medical emergencies, and that leads to about $6 billion a year for just in the US alone in damages for fleet managers. So there's a huge opportunity to help fleets while we also pursue the longer term OEM cycle.
And so how do you make money? You know, what's that business model behind that? And does it change from, for example, someone is doing fleets to someone that is more a consumer-based auto manufacturer?
Yeah. So we are purely B2B, and we make money off of a licensing SaaS, like monthly recurring model. And so with the OEMs, that is going to be figured out as to actually like who gets charged. They often pass on the cost to the end user as like a package, or like a safety package type deal. And so we're open to talking about that, but of course we would prefer not to push the cost onto the end user. A lot of people who would benefit most from our software are people who already have a high burden of costs in the actual medical like realm as well. So we'd rather not add to that. And we do believe this could help everybody and should be a base safety feature. So that's what we're approaching on the OEM side. On the fleet side, we actually work through the video telematics companies and are part of their recurring monthly model. So we're just a portion of what they already charge their fleet clients.
So what's the competition like for this space, Sam? How do you assess where you are and what the marketplace looks like?
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people thinking about adjacent spaces. You've also just driver monitoring systems in general. You get a lot of people focusing on like distracted, drunk, or drowsy driving. We're not focusing on that necessarily, but that's where a lot of our competitors are who would move into this space. So we focus on drowsy driving, maybe to the extent of understanding like the distinction between are you drowsy or are you actually having a medical emergency. Maybe in the future we would expand that, most likely, but we would need to do that feature expansion. But for now, we're very focused on medical emergency because it's one of the harder problems to solve. And we do believe that that actually creates a great moat to be able to expand in the future. So like I mentioned before, this data is very difficult to come by. You basically have to do observation studies within a hospital ecosystem with doctors around to be able to help people when they experience these events in a vehicle simulator. That becomes very time costly, very like financially costly. A lot of people don't want to do that, which helps give us that edge. A lot of people who are our competitors are focused on a little bit of the lower hanging fruit. It's a lot easier to get someone drunk and put them in a driving simulator. So we're going for this harder one because we think it actually provides us more defensibility in the future as well. There is one other company actually that just popped up in January, Moment AI, that actually is a direct competitor for us. Their installs, so very little is known about them, but I do think that they're more broadly focused than we are as well. So I think our focus actually enables to be able to actually set that moat quite strongly earlier on.
And expand a little bit on that side of data, right? Because you were talking about data right now, and what considerations you need to have with that data. You talked a little bit about privacy, you talked about security, but how do you make sure that customers are assured that that data is being used the right way?
Yeah. So that is one of the biggest challenges, I think, for us is how to communicate to the end user that we're not just stealing all of their medical information, right? Like we're not a medical device. We're not using anything that's personally identifiable. We're not diagnosing any of these things. So how do you actually communicate that to people? Because when people hear that you have a camera pointed at them and you're measuring their heart rate, breath rate, they get really freaked out, understandably. So that's something we are exploring in the fleet space. All of our friends in the fleet space would have offered to basically take any kind of like pamphlets and flyers and such and marketing that we have to be able to communicate to their drivers how we actually operate. And so that we can start practicing that message early to understand what people respond to and like what helps to ease those concerns. Really important to us to preserve that privacy. Again, we don't want to push cost of burden onto people who could benefit most from this. We also don't want to actually take advantage of their data as well. I think we see that way too often in the automotive, or not automotive space, but the tech space in general. So as far as, the data that we need to use, I mean, even just for building models, it's like the typical things with AI of like, we need, of course, high diversity representation of like every potential different group. Everyone's heart rate is different. So even understanding what is like a diverse heart rate space. So it's a large data pool that we need to be able to draw from as well to be able to make sure we're representative. One thing that does help though is that one of our advisors is a pioneer in the continual learning space. So all of our models, when they're in the vehicle, will actually personalize to the driver without necessarily needing a profile. It'll just be in the first few minutes of it running.
So Sam, it sounds like one of the challenges that you're going to face is just collecting this diverse data set, and that your strategy for collecting the data is at least in part to go to hospitals. Is that correct? So how are you going to fund this? Because it sounds like that might be fairly expensive.
Yeah. I mean, it's really why we're fundraising now. We've been able to work with the Cornell investment for the last year and a half to accomplish all of this. But we really need to be able to do a full seed round in order to raise the funds to actually go do these hospital studies. To be able to do all of this like widespread long-term data collection is expensive, and that would be what gets us to commercialization. I think it's so strong seeing the pipeline that we have of interest from various parties that shows that once we build this, people are excited to use it, to be able to get that upfront capital to be able to actually complete the production and bring it to market.
Okay, so maybe you can, well, before we get there, maybe Fernando, you can talk a little bit about what your thesis was when you decided to invest.
So our thesis is always how can we enable, how can we use digital technologies for problems that are really radical and difficult in the future. And I think that this is the best representation of that. There's a trend that is already happening where automotive is not just the hardware, it's very much software. Even some people think that now we should consider cars as just big cell phones, really, really enabled by software. And then there's a lot of problems that we couldn't solve before just by putting hardware. And so this is exactly the type of ideas and forward thinking that we put into, and it's just a very powerful demonstration of how digital technologies are still solving problems that we have, and how we haven't scratched the surface on that. So that was our thesis on investing in this company. And obviously, and maybe primarily, is because of the team. Sam is not only an absolutely wonderful and stellar researcher on the space. She's a leader. She knows the space quite well. She has that personal motivation too. So there was an absolute motivation of helping a team, herself and John, her co-founder, that are really the right people to lead an effort in this space.
Thanks for that. Okay, last question. We're running out of time here, but tell us a little bit about your fundraising history and plans for the future, Sam.
Yeah, so fundraising history, the only investment we've taken thus far is from Cornell. We really wanted to wait on our larger fundraising rounds for the seed round and moving forward until we were really ready to start building. We knew that we wanted to take in funds for getting this data, so it was about setting up the actual the network that we needed, getting the right advisors, getting the connections we needed, and actually getting into these labs and ready to go. So we've now reached that time, and we've been talking to a few people now. We have a lot of interest from VCs. And so, excited to talk to more. We're still looking for leads. So that's something that we are exploring. I think everybody knows the market has been a little rough right now, so things are moving a little bit slower. But I am hopeful that because we have so much interest, so much traction in the markets on our side, that we'll be able to close out that round in no time.
Great.